I think that if you want to be creative and you want to be disruptive, you need to be fearless.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch, we'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, the link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Porter's 5 Forces is a classic marketing tool created by Michael Porter back in 1979, and it still holds true today. It's a tool for analysing competitive environments, which we'll discuss later. But first, let's have a chat with Lubna Forzley, a TEDx speaker, links in the show notes obviously, who runs Stories, a boutique story transformation consultancy which helps leaders create stories worth sharing. On Lubna's LinkedIn profile, she calls herself a corporate super nanny, and rightly so, as Lubna helps craft strategies that can be implemented, not ones that will end up going nowhere, which so often happens in every single industry. But this isn't all based on intuition, as the strategies are built on data. Think of it like giving your data soul. But what makes Lubna even more impressive is her amazing backstory, as you'll find out a little bit later on. I'll let Lubna tell you all about that because she puts it so eloquently and so finely. It's an amazing story. Anyway, when talking to somebody who starts a company called Stories, what better question to kick things off with than Lubna? What is your favourite myth?
So I'd say, I don't know if I'd call it a myth. The things that I would like to advocate for is that mothers actually have an amazing career and be amazing mothers at the same time. I find that as a society, there's a misconception around this at times. And so I always say that, moms can, raise very healthy kids, but still live a life of purpose and achieve amazing things.
That's cool. Love that. So that brings us very nicely on to the main questions that I want to dive into with yourself. And the first one is just what's your story that's brought you to this stage of your career as the MD at Stories?
If I was to say this in brief, I've spent my life, I've had a really, really good career working for the top brands worldwide. And I did that for around 15 years. And then I decided to basically try out being on my own for a few years. And I started by registering a company called Stories. And the reason why I called it Stories, first and foremost, because obviously I have a marketing and communications background, so I thought the name worked really well. But more importantly, I really believe that on our deathbed, the only thing that matters is the story we leave behind. And I think not a lot of people live like that. I think everybody, lives a life where they're, so consumed by what people think and what they're wearing and spending time and effort on and money on material things. And I really believe that the only thing that matters is that story that we leave behind. So I really would love to help leaders create stories worth sharing, and I would love to help companies also do the same, because I think a lot of companies don't get that right, and they end up spending all their time and energy and money on promoting their products rather than promoting their purpose and their why. So that's more or less in brief why I started what I started.
That's cool, and it's such a change in mindset for certain people, and I'm a huge advocate of what you've just said there in terms of what you leave behind and the stories you tell, which leads us nicely on. If you could just explain what your company stories. I think we're going to say that word stories quite a lot in this.
Many times.
Can you explain what stories actually does?
Sure. It's actually a nice word. I mean,
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, what I end up doing is I act like a corporate super nanny. And this was inspired by me being a mom. What a super nanny does in a normal home is she comes into your home, she observes you for a few hours, and then she tells you the hard truth that you need to hear. And she gives you tips and guidance so that you can transform from the inside out. And then she leaves, and then she keeps in touch and makes sure that you're heading in the right direction. And I wanted to provide a service that didn't exist in the market, because there's a lot of agencies that exist, and I wanted to complement what they're doing rather than compete with them, because I'm on my own. And so what I did is I created a corporate super nanny service where I go into a team, a large corporate communications or marketing team, and I sit with them for a period of 3 to 6 months. I audit them. I look at their skills, their capacities. I look at their business plans and strategies, and I come up with new ones, and I help them achieve these by training them, by transforming, by working with the CEO essentially on a day-to-day basis so that they can transform their culture from the inside out, and so they can transform their external communication, but starting from the inside out. That's more or less what I do.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned there that you take, say, 3 to 6 months to really understand a company. Is that quite a difficult sell for some people, especially in the kind of mindset that a lot of people have, that they want a now culture, if you like? That's what I'm trying to say. Is 3 to 6 months quite a difficult sell?
Not really. I mean, I haven't had a hard time with that at all. I think I've found it long. I'm not too sure that I'll continue, targeting a 6 months time frame. I prefer naturally a shorter time frame, but it hasn't been hard to sell a 3 to 6 months time frame. I think so. What I say is, it doesn't take 3 months to actually understand the culture. It's very quick for me to understand the culture because I've worked, extensively in many different companies across my journey. But what takes time is actually implementing new plans, coming up with new strategies that are sound, that are based on a lot of research, and then structuring the team in a way so that they can actually achieve these plans. I think the hardest thing that I've had is scaling, not selling a 3 to 6 months term.
Okay. Within something that you discuss within your stories brand, kind of these 3 pillars, which are your story, your mindset, and your culture. Can you explain why you focused on these and how they can be effectively utilized?
So I think the 3 are completely interlinked. What you normally see is that companies call agencies or call consultants or whatever because they want something is not right with their marketing program, or they want to grow faster, or they want to rebrand. So they're more or less starting with the end result. But rebranding a company or changing a company's logo achieves nothing if your culture stays the same. I've seen a lot of banks make that mistake, and I say banks because most banks have had to transform because of the digital world. And because they've had to do that, they go on and announce rebranding campaigns and new marketing plans, but their culture remains the same. So what ends up happening is that these cultural or digital transformation plans fail. And so what I really believe is that it's important to actually change a marketing and communications program or strategy from the inside out. So you start with the culture and with the mindset. And then you transform externally. So I really think that it's really important for a CEO to change their culture first and make sure that they have the right purpose communicated to their staff, to make sure that they have values that are actually lived and practiced rather than just values that look nice on the wall, and make sure that they have the right processes in place and the right mindset in place, so that when they actually go out to the market to communicate a new campaign or communicate a new brand or a new logo or whatever they want to communicate, that's actually that they can actually accommodate that with the culture that they have.
Okay. I just want to go a bit deeper into what you actually provide and how this could potentially help any marketing students. I'm always pushing for creativity in any types of exams or assignments, and because I think it's massively important, particularly within the marketing industry. But when you're in those situations, it can be slightly difficult sometimes, because you feel like you are writing for a purpose, but you want to stick to certain elements and keep it almost too studious. Do you have any tips on how people can start to write creatively but still maintain a level of professionalism?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about creativity in general, which, I mean, the same tips apply to writing creatively, but also being creative. I think the best two tips I have to help people be more creative in life are two things that are maybe, one is traditional, everybody will advise you of that, and the other one is untraditional. I'll start with the untraditional one. The first one is to be fearless. I think that if you want to be creative and you want to be disruptive, you need to be fearless. And you're going to start noticing that in the future, because everybody's bombarded with so many messages, people are going to stop paying attention. Like, people are already stopping to pay attention. And the only thing that's actually working these days is the brands or the companies that are actually doing something that's different from the norm, that's fearless, that's bold, that's daring. And the starting point of all of that is actually being fearless. And I think a lot of agencies, for example, when they're working with their clients, they fear giving them campaigns that are out of the box because they feel that they'll get rejected, or a company may fear launching a campaign that's actually bold and daring because they're scared of the reaction. So my first tip is to be fearless. The second tip is, first and foremost, to connect with their target audience. Know who that target audience is so well. Know their psychology, know their needs, know their pain points, and try to provide a solution to that pain point. I really think that if you want to write creatively, or if you want to be creative, you need to connect. You need to understand. And the only way you can connect is by actually understanding a person's pain and by providing a solution to that pain. And you can still be very professional while you do that. I think, I'm not asking people who are uncomfortable with vulnerability to actually go out and be vulnerable. I think it's important to be vulnerable or truthful, I'd say. But to do it in a very professional way. I think you can combine the two together. But I think, we focused a lot on storytelling, and I'm a big believer in storytelling because I called my company Stories, but I think the future is also about truth-telling, not just storytelling.
That leads us really nicely onto another question I've got for you, because there was a quote on your website, and it simply says, "A story worth sharing." So how do you create a story that's worth sharing?
You live a life worth living. I think when you live a life worth living, a life where you're fearless, you have faith, you have a purpose, you have a why that's guiding you, you have values that are guiding you, and you're bold to make a change. You say to yourself every morning when you wake up, God put me here for a reason, and I'm going to do something with that reason. I'm going to go out and change the world, or I'm going to go out and make impact. And when you do that, you don't really need to make a lot of effort to create a story worth sharing, because it'll come on its own. Wow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think sometimes what's right in front of us we forget, and that's our own lives and our own stories, and looking back at those and how we can resonate with our audience through what we've learned. And it goes back to what you were saying at the very start, where you're talking about being truthful to yourself and being open and honest, but also fearful. Fearful, being fearless.
Fearless.
Yeah, not fearful, sorry. Well, I suppose you're going to be fearful, but you need to be fearless. And pushing and promoting that through your company and your culture to build something that... Because if you're telling your truth, nobody can deny that in a way.
Absolutely. And I really think that every person has a story,
Hmm.
and every person has a story worth sharing. And I think every company has a story worth sharing. They're just too scared to actually like share that, or they don't know how to share that. They don't know how to, communicate it effectively. But I really think that, if you look at your highs and lows in life and ask yourself, what made this moment a high moment in my life? What made this moment a low moment in my life? And you take the top 6 to 8 moments, you'll find that there's a lot of common uh, themes that will
Hmm.
emerge, and that's a good starting point for your story. And I also did a campaign on my LinkedIn, where I'm most active, about how to help people find their why. I did a 10 question series,
Okay.
and I'll be releasing a video on that also on my LinkedIn soon. Um, so do look out for that, because I really think that if you do these exercises properly, I really think that it would be a good starting point to coming up with your why statement, and that's already a good starting point to identifying your story.
And also on your LinkedIn page, there is a link to your TEDx talk,
Uh-huh. Is
which
there? Okay.
I'm sure there is that. I'm sure that's how I found it, and that's also
Okay.
definitely worth checking out, because your backstory and the way you build that story up and tell people it's really cool. Really enjoyed watching that.
Excellent. I was thinking the minute I go back from my holiday, I need to put that link, because I wasn't sure if I put it or not. But if you're telling me it's there, I'm really happy,
I'm sure.
because you've just saved me something to do.
I'm sure it is. I'll check it out after this, and I'll be
No
certain
worries.
to tell you. And if it isn't, I'll share the link in the show notes anyway. But
Okay.
I'll also
Perfect.
remind you to put it on your LinkedIn page as
Okay.
well.
Thank you.
um, so we were talking about creativity there, but one question that I've got is, can we actually use data to create or help create stories that are of value? Is there any way of doing that?
You should. It's not can we.
Okay.
It's you should. That's the future. The future is all about data storytelling, and I think this is all driven by also social media and the digital transformation, because these days everybody has our data. And yes, you can, and the best way to do that would be through personalization. I think every person wants to feel valued and special,
Hmm.
and those that have your data can actually make good use of your data by making you feel very valued and special. So, by tailoring their communication or the marketing campaigns and strategies towards you and your needs and your lifestyle and your personal situation. And I think it's actually dangerous not to use your data, I mean, provided you do it properly and ethically.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you should absolutely use data for storytelling.
Okay. Just taking a step back, when we were talking about living with no fear, I think that's a big and bold statement that a lot of people will think, well, I can do that, but when it actually comes to showing up, they really struggle with it. How can we instill this in ourselves, like even from the smallest things, such as taking exams, and receiving those results, like stepping up and actually looking at your exam results, to even making major decisions in our lives? Is there any way we can start to instill this no fear in ourselves?
I think that's a hard one to answer. I'll tell you why. Because I had no choice but to live with no fear. I,
Okay.
I grew up during the Lebanese war, and every day we'd wake up and we'd say, "Oh my God, we're still alive," because at any moment we could die, right? And so, I remember as a child, I was sitting in a corner of a house with my family, and I would watch bombs fall right in front of my eyes, and glass shatter, and buildings fall, and all of that. And when you live through that, the only thing that you have left is your faith, and you saying, if I survive this for another day, then there is a reason why God put me on this earth. And so I had no choice but to grow up like that. And therefore, it just naturally came to me. I never had to train myself to be fearless. Having said that, I have had moments of fear. I still do. Every person does. I think the best way to overcome fear is to, just be confident and have faith. And the one thing I try to teach my kids, because they've never had to go through what I had to go through, they live a very, I would say, easy lifestyle compared to what I've had to go through. And so I try to ask them, what's the worst that could happen? And when you ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? You become automatically, more fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have, I guess, if we translate that to students, I think, they need to be confident, they need to try their best and work really hard and have faith that because they've tried really hard and they've done their best, that they are going to achieve, amazing results. And more importantly, if they fail, they say, okay, so what have I learned from this lesson? And what? I failed. What's the worst that can happen?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still alive. Thank God. I'm still okay. My health is okay. My family is okay. We start over. You just take another stab at the exam and you do it again, and
I,
you'll be okay.
I mean, just to put that into context, if anybody is doing assignments or exams or anything where they're a bit concerned or worried or they have that fear, just to comprehend the fact that you're the person that lived through people dropping bombs literally at your feet is, someone walking to an exam just needs to put it into context. And like you said, what's the worst that can happen? And it's incomprehensible for me to think about that being a small child and having to see things like that is unreal. And for you to have that fearless attitude and just to go, okay, this has happened, this is my life, but I'm not going to let that stop me in any way, shape, or form. And to be where you are is just amazing. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I actually think it's one of the best experiences I've lived, and I think I've learned a lot of many, many, many positive things because I've gone through that. I think I'm solid. I'm tough. I have faith. You just learn so many things when you go through that experience.
Yeah. And people get annoyed when a website doesn't load in 3 seconds. It just puts it in context, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
It states on your profile, and you mentioned it previously, that you're a huge fan of digital transformation and that you actively study and research the latest trends. So I suppose it'd be really good if we could understand as marketers what we should be looking at in the next few years in terms of digital transformation.
So I am a huge fan of digital transformation, but I don't think it's anything very different from what we've seen before. It's just taking the offline online, really. The
Mm-hmm.
marketing principles are more or less the same, except I think you need that connection with your audience to be stronger, just because they're bombarded with so many messages.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd look out for amazing content in the future, which you could leverage through digital channels. I'd look out for storytelling and truth telling. I'd keep my eye on, the influencer industry and how that's gonna shape in the future. Um, and yeah, I think that's what comes to mind. And I really think stay relevant. I really think it's so important, to stay relevant. I've made an effort to read a lot about digital transformation, to take an online course on digital transformation, to actively study, the topic. I go to conferences all the time to learn about digital transformation. So I really think it's so important for students to stay relevant, because I could have easily not done any of that, and I don't know if I would have made the impact I've made, because I think it was so important for me to just stay up to date.
Yeah, and stepping up, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Lubna, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Sure. Let's
Cool.
do it.
Brilliant.
I like to have fun.
Fantastic. Name one must-read business book.
Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek, and I'm a huge believer in living with the why or living with a purpose. And I think that's one book that I really love.
Love it. What was the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled was your name before
Love
I
it.
got on that podcast with you.
Wow. Yeah, I've been Googled. Love it. That's the best answer we've ever had for that, by the way.
Excellent.
What is your most used app at the moment?
I'd say two: WhatsApp, just because I do everything on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And the second one is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in LinkedIn. And unfortunately, I started my LinkedIn journey a bit late in life, but I'm a huge advocate of content creation on LinkedIn. So yeah, I would love for people to connect with me there.
I don't think you're alone in that, and I'm amazed how many people say LinkedIn is their most used app at the moment. It's
Great.
amazing. Yeah.
Excellent.
What would be a one tip for people who are studying?
Other than all the stuff we've covered,
Yeah.
I'd say um, just believe in what you're studying, I suppose, and love what you're doing, because I think it's so, so important. Because, you're going to go into the workplace, and I've been in jobs where, I wasn't completely in love with what I was doing. And I've been in jobs where I was completely in love with what I was doing. And I can tell you that it actually has a huge impact on your personal life when you love what you do. And so, yeah, love what you do and love what you're studying.
Cool. I'm really interested to see what you say to this last question. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
I'll tell you what I told my 10-year-old this morning, because my 10-year-old happens to be the youngest reporter in the Middle East.
Wow.
She only started at the age of 8. And so whenever she's anywhere, she just starts reporting and talking as a reporter. And we were coming back from camping this morning, and she started in the car saying, "Oh, welcome," just exactly like a pilot would do in an airplane. And so she's like, "I'm going to record that." And she recorded it. And then when she finished, I said, "Tala, you forgot something really, really important that they say in the plane." And what they say in the plane is, put your own mask first before you assist others. And I teach her that lesson because I would love to go back in time and tell myself that lesson. And I try to remind myself of that every day when I can. I just think when you live a life of impact and a life like the life I've had, you tend to try so hard to want to make an impact on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is you tend to forget yourself in the process sometimes. And that's not good. You shouldn't. So I give you my personal example. One of my biggest failures in life is I didn't work on my personal brand. I spent my entire life helping other brands communicate their story. And I completely switched that this year. I decided to put my own personal brand first and to make an active effort. And, whoever connects with me on LinkedIn will notice that, notice a huge shift in my journey. And that's because I've decided to put my own mask first before I assist others. And I've noticed that when I do that, I'm able to make an even larger impact on other people, because I'm able to influence a larger number of people. So that's what I would say to my 10-year-old daughter and to my 10-year-old self.
Brilliant. What was your daughter's name there?
Tala.
Tyler. Oh, big up. Well done for getting, and that'll just be amazing. I'd be amazed to see, say, in another 10 years' time, what she's up to, because she seems to have a good head on a young shoulders, and for you to
Yes,
be
she does.
pushing and promoting her in that way to do these things, what a great education that is. Amazing, great stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Lubna, final question: if people want to
Sure.
get in touch with you, where should they go?
So I think that I'm most active on LinkedIn. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd say start with LinkedIn. Or, I mean, I have a personal website or my company website, and I'm sure you can share the links with them
Absolutely.
through this podcast, so they can feel free to just find my contacts over there. But I'm very, very active on LinkedIn, and that would be the best place to connect, because I actually put out content on a daily basis, except for obviously, like, the summer and some holidays. But otherwise, I'm very active there.
Lubna, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Most welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for having me, and best of luck to you and to your students.
Well, what can I say? Once again, thanks so much to Lubna for joining us this week. And if you're not inspired by her backstory and her teachings, I'm not quite sure what will inspire you. But here's some takeaways that might help. Lubna shared 2 top tips to becoming more creative that can be implemented in any situation. And that is, be fearless and connect with your audience. If you can do these 2 things, creativity should be much easier and more effective. When discussing data, Lubna is in no doubt that you should be using it to create stories of value. Think about personalisation and tailoring communications towards an individual rather than a set of customers. Yes, it takes some time and planning, but it is possible to generate those one-to-one communications that create huge impact for you. And finally, in situations where you feel overwhelmed or get the fear, just think, what's the worst that could happen? As Lubna describes, she grew up in a war-torn country with bombs landing at her feet. Now put that into context with you sitting an exam, starting a new job, or doing something that you're concerned about. Yes, you have anxiety, but try and be fearless. And finally, we look to Michael Porter's 5 forces. So what are Porter's 5 forces, and why is this such an important model within marketing? As you may expect, the model itself focuses on 5 forces Michael Porter deemed crucial back in 1979 to focus upon within a company's competitive environment, within a market sector, and also outside of that market sector. And it still holds true today. So let's take a quick look at each one of those forces. The first one being competitive rivalry. What is the rivalry like within your market? Is it fierce, or do you own a niche in the marketplace? Are there a few or many competitors? The answers to these questions will make a huge difference to your marketing strategy. The second is supplier power. How much control do your suppliers have? If raw materials are in short supply, you may find they hold all the cards. But a good relationship with a supplier, or utilising various suppliers, may help reduce the risks of this becoming an issue. The third force is buyer power. Do your buyers hold all the cards, not your suppliers? If you're dealing with a small set, possibly yes. Switching costs also become important here. The harder it is to switch, the less it's likely to happen. The fourth force is the threat of substitutions. Are there different ways of solving the customer's problems that aren't exactly what you offer? If these substitutes offer a better solution, then they need to be considered as a threat. Within this category, try and think creatively as to what could be a substitute, as it may be a product or service that you haven't considered before. And before you know it, boom, your market share is gone. And finally, is the threat of new entrants to your marketplace. Are competitors entering your market and increasing competition, or is it a difficult market to penetrate? It's worth considering how long it may take to become established within your marketplace and how easy it is to enter it. Some industries can be hard to penetrate, such as pharmaceuticals, or perhaps geographically it's difficult to enter a marketplace. Whereas others, there might not be as many barriers. And there you have it, Michael Porter's 5 forces. Use it, learn from it, and happy marketing. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.